Hello and welcome back. This is not a Thursday, but it is a little bit of a news video. We are going to be discussing the possibility of Europa Universalis 5 getting teased in this Tinto Talk under the codename Project Caesar. So they're not telling us it's Europa Universalis 5, but this is what a lot of people suspected. Now, if you have seen this before, and you have seen why people think this is Europa Universalis 5, I probably don't have too much more to add on the matter, and this maybe isn't going to be the video for you, but a lot of people have on stream asked me about this very specifically, so I thought I would make a short little video to talk about it, as well as go over the two Tinto Talks dev diaries, both of these, which are quite short, which sort of feature this project that people think is going to be Europa Universalis 5. And this is the meat and potatoes of it right here. This image is why people think that we're going to have Europa Universalis 5. And the reason for this is here we have trade wind lanes in a game with sort of, in this middle area, this is going to be impassable, and we have these trade wind lanes which are going to give bonus speed, going in particular directions, and they think that this only contextually makes a lot of sense if we're thinking Europa Universalis. We have kind of also in here, in the same spoiler, we also have the world map, which is talking about projections. We'll get into that in a second. We're going to go through both of these dev diaries, but we have here the projection, and maybe we can make this a little bit sized a little bit more appropriately, but we are having a projection here of the map that is going to be used. And the idea here, for most people who've been taking a look at this and think that this is Europa Universalis, is we are dealing with a global game, and we are dealing with a global game that cares about trade winds. In particular, if you have steam power, you're not going to care about trade winds, so people don't think this is like Victoria 3 or later. And similarly, if you have a world map, it's not some regional thing, right? And so when do people become global powers? But also before Steam, for many people, they think that this is, or this is the speculation I've seen, and you can see all the little trade wind things here, the various lanes. They think that this means that it has to be the time period of Europa Universalis. This is the only thing that makes sense. And to me, that kind of makes some sense, but it could just be an entirely different game. And so this is the idea, but let's get into both of these dev diaries and go through them, and then I'll give my thoughts. But again, if you've already seen this theory, you probably are just about as informed as I am. So let's go into it. We have these Tinto Talks, the first one appearing February 28th. Hello everyone, and welcome to, what is it really? Teaser. It's Europa Universalis 5, maybe not, who knows. Is this a game called Tinto Talks? No, not really. First of all, Tinto stands for Paradox Tinto, which is the studio founded in 2020 in Spain. And so we have almost 30 people, so that's the size of the development, I assume, or the entire, not just the development, but the entire team. This seems like a pretty good chunk of people, but I don't know how many people they have on various projects, but if they have 30 people on this project, this to me implies that this is a pretty substantive project to be working on, but I don't know the numbers of various other projects. Now this out of the way, what's the talks part? And we have this nice little picture of the Tinto Talk. Notably, that doesn't look futuristic, right? And so we're not seeing anything futuristic-y looking. In particular, trade winds matter if you are sailing, and not if you're doing steam power. So let's continue on. A long time ago, we started talking about a game as soon as we started working on it. Back in the long, almost forgotten past, we used to make games in about 8 to 9 months. I remember announcing Vicky 2, which is 2 mock-up screenshots and a page of ideas. This has changed a little bit over time, and so they're slowly rolling out this idea of a new game, but this new game has 30 people working on it, which seems like a lot. This changed over time with the first rule of not announcing a game until it passed its alpha milestone in case it would be cancelled, as happened with Rune Master. And then when projects started going from 18-month development cycles with games like EU4 to many years for most of our recent games, which this is an indication that even if this is Europa Universalis 5, probably not going to see it anytime soon, then time from announcement to release has become much closer to the release of the game. Unless... Okay, so they're talking about announcing stuff later. Why does this matter? Well, from a development perspective, communicating with players is extremely beneficial as it provides us with feedback. But if it's so late in the development process that you cannot adapt to the feedback, then a development diary is just a marketing tool. It's not a feedback tool, right? I think that games like Imperator might have looked different if we had involved the community earlier and listened to feedback. So this is the classic paradox we learned from Imperator, which I do think they do. I've made this point multiple times. If we look back at Hoey 4, this was the first time we talked about air warfare, about 10 years ago, and it's not as much common with the release version. Now, I'm not a Hoey expert, so I can't point out the differences, but we do see this screenshot, which does look pretty nice, pre-alpha up in the bottom right corner. It's wild to think that Hoey, once upon a time, it was not released. However, talking about a game for a long time is not great for building hype either, and tends to make and to be able to make a proper huge announcement is important as well. So what is this then? We'll call this subforum Tinto Talks, where we're going to talk about a game without talking about the game. We will be talking about design aspects of the game we are working on. We will not tell you which game it is, nor will we be able to tell you when it is announced, nor will we be able to tell you when it is released. But here, so first of all, it's not like you're being a lawyer with the copy, but nor when it will be released is not worded in such a way that it's not if it's going to be released, right? For this implies a sense of certainty that it will be released, which I think is interesting, but at the same time, this is a development diary, right? It's not a guy who's trying to be necessarily be perfect with his words, but this does kind of belie a sense of this is something that's going to be released at some point. Just food for thought, kind of analyzing that. We will be talking with you here almost every week, so we might start doing these, keeping up with this on kind of a consistent basis, because my most played, other than Victoria 3, my most played Paradox game is Europa Universalis 4. I really like Europa Universalis. I haven't played it in a long time. I haven't played since Leviathan, which was a hot mess. And I've since not wanted to acquire over $100 worth of DLC in order to play, or kind of do the monthly thing. Maybe I'll play sometime, but we will be talking with you almost every week because we need your input to be able to shape this game into a masterpiece. Without you, and without your input, that will not be possible. So what about Project Caesar, which is the code name for whatever this is, which we cannot tell you, but it might be Europa Universalis 5. Project Caesar, at PDX, which called Tinto is a child of, we tend to use, Tinto is a child of Caesar? Or okay, whatever. We tend to use Roman leader emperor names for our games. Augustus was Stellaris, Titus was CK3, Sulla was Imperator, Nero was Runemaster, Caligula was VK3. We love to see some Caligula. we even named our internal empty project for Clausewitz and Jomny that we base it on that we base every new game on Marius. In Q2, in 2020, I started writing code, prototyping new systems that I wanted to try out, adapting to the lessons from what had worked well and what had not worked well, plus recruiting for a completely new studio in Paradox Tinto, training people on how to make these types of games while making some expansions for EU4. This is also important to note. I believe this was written by Johan? Let's see. Yeah, it's written by Johan. And so I don't know the devs that well in terms of who's working on what. I haven't been in the milieu of following stuff very closely except until after Victoria 3. But it's telling that he's working on EU4 and this project, training people how to make these types of games. Okay. Today, though, even though we're a fair bit away from announcing the new game, so it will not be announced for a while, we want to start talking weekly about the things we've worked on to get your feedback on it and adapt it to it so it becomes even better. However, we'll start with the version which is not really something you do change at this stage. We'll start with the vision. Okay, and so there's basically three things. They can't really change it. And then we will see, these are the pillars of the game. So first of all, believable world. You should be able to play the game and feel like you are in the world that makes sense and feels rich and realistic while not making the gaming less accessible. This is such an interesting trade-off axis, and in particular in Victoria 3, I think local goods are unfun from the gaming, making the gaming less accessible, but are more realistic, and so this is an interesting trade-off. Features should feel believable and plausible and avoid the abstractions unless necessary. Next, we have setting immersion. Our games thrive on player imagination and what-if scenarios. We want to ensure both a high degree of faithfulness to the setting, which will give a special feel to the game. We will strive to give the game the most in-depth feeling of flavor possible. And then we have replayability, which I think is a very important pillar, especially for I mean, people who play Paradox games expect to get enormous amounts of hours out of the game. So this is an interesting one to note. Like, I think Victoria 3 on the replayability front kind of suffers, but the system is really interesting. And we don't see anything here about the system or the simulate, like this type of thing, which would be, in my mind, if you were to describe a pillar for Victoria 3, like the system is like a pillar itself, where you're doing both economic and political simulation. But continuing on, there should be many ways to play different starts and reasons to replay them. Different mechanics in different parts of the world should create a unique experience depending on who you choose to play. And in the context of Victoria 3, I've seen one of the defenses of not giving individual mechanics to different nations being that since it's so close to modernity, they don't want to do something that's kind of, for lack of, it's not impact in this way, but they don't want to do something that's politically incorrect, right? They don't want to say a certain race is better at like a certain thing, or a certain nationality is better at a certain thing by nature. And so there's this sort of neutral stance in Victoria 3 where it's just very sandboxy, but this leads to every nation kind of playing very similarly in Victoria 3. You don't have like these nation trees or the focus trees or this type of stuff, which I wouldn't want focus trees, but I'm saying that there's not this sort of thing. But here we have different mechanics in different parts of the world. And again, we're kind of forming this narrative in mind that this might be Europa Universalis 5, which this would make sense because this is how EU4 plays. With a deep and complex game, there should be so many choices and paths that the players can feel like they could always come back to get a new story with the same start. Sounds ambitious, right? And then that's kind of the dev diary. They'll say we'll come up next week with maps. And this is the dev diary that has gotten people talking and people sounding very interested. And this is what people were asking me about. They were like, what do you think of EU5 coming out? What do you think of Tinto Talks 2? What do you think of what Johan posted? And this type of stuff. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. So this is kind of what we've come to. And welcome to the second week of Tinto Talks, where I talk about the design we have for our new top secret game, very Caesar. Yeah, Julius Caesar, who died well over 36 years ago. Project Caesar. Today we'll delve into everyone's favorite topic, maps. Let's begin with the projection we chose for this game, which is going to be super nice. It's deviating away from the Mercator projection, which I've never been a fan of in games because it makes Europe look absolutely huge. It inflates like the size of Europe and makes it look really big relative to everything else, or relative to what it should. And this looks like a much more balanced map, but let's kind of see what they have to say. In the past, we have used Mercator or Miller projection, which has severe drawbacks, as you are all aware of. As we are restricted to cylindrical maps, we had to pick the least bad of them, which is why we went with the Gauss sternographic projection. Why is this good? Well, it keeps areas we care about most, those in the middle latitudes, bigger without making the poles ridiculously oversized or the equator too undersized, which is effectively how Europe looks huge, is because it gets ballooned up, as does, anyways. I'm not an expert on this, and we can continue going on with what he's talking about. Without the equator too undersized. It also is reasonable about a conformal shape, meaning that the shapes of the continents stay close to their real areas and angles without sacrificing recognizable shape of them. And so here we have the projection. Now, again, in this, you are seeing these sea lanes, and the other areas are not going to be passable. And in particular, this creates interesting mechanics where if you want to create a blockade on a nation, you actually don't need to blockade their entire coast, right? All you would have to do is blockade certain regions, and that seems like a fun thing. But we think about, okay, what do we need an entire world map for? And the world map, it's not present in CK3, right? Because we don't need it because we're not going to other areas of the world. And so it's a smaller map. It's certainly not present for any sort of simulation before them. And then again, these sea lanes become unimportant or less important in the instance of us no longer navigating through sailing. And so even if you're playing something that were to progress towards a Steam Age, right? Because they could make a game that starts with the beginning of civilization and progresses to something like, I would expect you to see, nodes that are inside this unnavigable area. That's what this appears to be. I forget what it calls, wasteland in the ocean. And they don't have a bunch of provinces. This appears to just be a wasteland node, effectively. And so this is the argument I have heard, and it seems to be a compelling one. But I just want to point out that this could just be an entirely different game, and it's only the fact that Europa Universalis has been out for so long, and I think there have been some press releases where they've kind of hinted at stopping development for EU4 that make this seem extremely probable, because they could be trying to launch a different game, or a game with a different sort of scope, perhaps a game that is centered around just trade. Like, because if you were making a game specifically for trade, this would also make a ton of sense, right? But they have 30 people working on it. That seems like a large development team. If anyone knows if that's not a large development team, please feel free to put it in the comments, because I would like to be aware of this, or any information on what the size of development teams for other projects are. But I don't think this is like a small side project, right? This seems like something that's probably going to be pretty big, and because of that, Europa Universalis 5 makes a ton of sense. So let's kind of stop talking about this map projection. In most of our games set in the past, which again, this is a hint, it's a fairly obvious hint given, but this is not going to the future if it's set in the past. We have used the world of province for the smallest piece of clay on the map. However, with the map design we are going for in the game, this does not thematically fit, as the map is much more more granular, and what people associate with real-world province would not fit. So we went with the terminology we had used in code since the first game we made in the old Europa engine, which was location. So first game we had made in the, I'm trying to think if this implies that it's Europa Universalis. The first game we made in the old Europa engine. I don't think it does, but that is the notion of location. So we now have our smallest subdivision referred to as a location, while a group of locations is a province, and a group of provinces is an area, and a group of areas is a region, and a group of regions is called a subcontinent, and a group of subcontinents is called a continent. Now, to contrast this just very briefly with CK, there are no kingdoms or empires. Again, not that it would be like CK4 or something crazy like that. Also, I don't think that the sailing stuff makes... yeah, okay, let's just continue on. But I just wanted to contrast it. They are calling it these things, and it's not related to a sort of jurisdiction of like kingdom or empire. If we take the home of Paradox Interactive, it is located in our location Stockholm, which was the province of Uppland, which is in the Svealand area, which is in the Scandinavia region, which is part of the Western Europe subcontinent, which is part of the European continent. Let's kind of just go over that quickly. If we take a look at home of Paradox Interactive, its location, it's located in our location, Stockholm. Now, can we see Stockholm? Stockholm's right here on the map, which is part of the province Uppland, which I'm guessing is this area that is denoted by this hard line instead of the dotted line, which is part of Svealand, which I'm guessing we would have to zoom out more, which is part of Western Europe, which is part of Scandinavia region, which is Western Europe subcontinent, Europe continent. Okay. Now you may wonder, why did we go with such granularity on a map like this? Well, this is entirely gameplay driven. So now we are going to want to have this in gameplay. From making a deep, engaging gameplay peacetime possible, a deeply engaging gameplay peacetime possible. So we have another hint here. We are going to be going to war. So this makes it so, this kind of narrows it down. It's not going to be just a trade simularity or a trade simulator, because if peacetime is possible, that means war is possible. To better controlling the pacing of the game and to allow for more fun military campaigns. So we're going to have military campaigns. Campaign implies that you're, controlling a nation, which again, most people would assume, but this is just kind of, if we're trying to tease out information about what this is going to be a little bit more. We have tried to make provinces as historical as possible when it comes to the borders, while trying to keep the size of the locations consistent, with a more or less regular progression from smallest to biggest, with a rule of thumb being that the location shouldn't have more than 3 times the number of pixels compared to the neighboring one. This seems reasonable to me. This is a design choice. A design is in presentation of information, how stuff looks, but okay. So is the entire globe then divided into lots of tiny locations? No, as there are 4 types of locations, and we have taken heavily inspiration from the maps of Imperator and Victoria 3. So 4 types of locations, which are then part of the region, part of the area, which is part of a region, which is part of a subcontinent and a continent, etc. The first type of location is more uniform in size. For a land location, this would be a normal location that can be settled. A normal location that can be settled. This is an interesting one. That can be settled is maybe... Okay, so, well, first of all, we think of colonization in EU4, and this could refer to colonization. But this notion of settling implies perhaps something stretching far further back in history, right? And a normal location that can be settled. Or it implies that you can create cities in a dynamic way over the course of time. But in sort of EU4, we kind of have all the cities at the start, excluding the colonization stuff. And so the use of the word settle might not be appropriate. And here we have the use of the word settled. And this, to me, implies we might be seeing something that's way bigger. Now, I still think it sounds like EU5. I think that's an excellent guess. And when someone pointed out the sea lanes and they talked about EU5, that made a ton of sense. But if you were to make a game that was supposed to progress not from 1444, but far, far earlier to the Second World War or to the Victorian era, because to me, the sea lanes kind of implies that we're not talking about steamships. Then that would also make sense, and this word settled, in terms of language choice, has me... Now, okay, I don't know if English is Johan's first language as well, or Johan, I don't know how it's pronounced, and this might just be a translation thing, but this is to me, a peculiar word that doesn't really fit with EU4. And so perhaps we're going to see new mechanics such as settling cities, if this is EU5 and EU5, or perhaps we're seeing a different type of game. And for sea location, this would be a coastal sea location or any location adjacent to a coastal sea location. The second type is the sea current locations, which connect coastal areas with each other, allowing faster travel in one direction. So this is the second type of location. And here we have this. This makes sense if you're talking about sailing. Doesn't make as much sense, as far as I know, if you're talking about steamships, although I don't know that much about navigation, so maybe it does. We know that this is not a game in the future because they talked about history, right? And so, but even then, still probably not steam or any other type of power of ship. And we have this kind of picture where you can see the coastal locations, of which there are a lot, and then the sea lane locations. Okay. The third is what we call impassable wasteland, which can be used to describe parts of the Sahara, Greenland, or other places where hardly any people live even today. Again, the even today again implies that it's like history, but we kind of already know that. We also use these types for majority of the water covering the ocean. So majority of the water covering the ocean, impassable wasteland. And so this is kind of confirmed here. I don't remember reading this when I read over it before, but they do make it impassable wasteland. So we are having a situation where it's only these lanes that are sailable, I assume, because this is navigable post-sailing. Finally, we will have what we currently call passages. These are land locations that cannot be settled, by anyone, but can still be traversed by an RB with some insanely heavy attrition or allow trade to pass through. Think of passages across the Sahara Desert. Now, or allow trade to pass through is an interesting one because it implies that there are not set trade nodes, right? This is kind of the second big hint, which I think is interesting because I don't think if there was a set trade node that went through these impassable areas in particular, you would use the language in this way or allow trade to pass through. You would just say, or trade passes through. And allow implies that there's on-off conditions for trade and a system that is more dynamic than EU4's current trade system, which is very interesting because this means that the trade won't always be passing through these impassable areas. And again, we have this settled idea. They can't be settled by anyone, which implies that there is more settling going on and the creation of cities and this type of stuff, or settlements. I have no idea what this is going to refer to, but this is very interesting that we see settled yet again here later, because this is dynamic cities. I mean, it leaves a lot kind of open-ended, but also that trade would be dynamic because allow trade to pass through. Also very interesting. Again, we're kind of assuming it's EU5 here with these types when we're kind of talking about it being interesting in this context, but it could be something from like way earlier if we're talking about settling. I certainly would love a Dawn of like history type game, and maybe that makes sense. Like maybe that would be a very ambitious project, right? If we were talking about, you know, taking a world map and we're going to start from the dawn of history, right? And have it be this hugely massive and ambitious project that just sort of unifies all of Paradox's projects. That would be insane and super cool. I don't think it's that, but one can always hope. And that would be like, you know, from a time period of like 2000 BC to, I guess, sailing. Or up to, I mean, the ships imply that it wouldn't make sense for them to be having anything past steamships, but okay. Speaking of desert, in a lot of our games, we define each province as having a single terrain value like forest, tundra, or desert. This is rather limiting because eventually you end up with a huge list of complex things, like Arctic forested hill or desert mountain. What we've done in Project Caesar is to take a deep look at how we did this in Victoria 2, where we had split terrain into topography and vegetation. Interesting. And take it further. Now we have 3 different values set for each location. Climate, things include arid, Arctic, continental, and I assume like wet, this type of stuff. Topography, flatlands, hills, mountains, and vegetation, forest, woods, farmlands, desert. What the actual gameplay impact of this is, we'll talk about much later. Sorry, okay? Next week, we'll be talking about something that could be rather controversial. So we're probably, especially if you guys are especially interested in this, please let me know. If a lot of people are interested in news following whatever's going on here, we will probably continue to do kind of updates on these, and we'll see how things go. I'm very excited. This is kind of the reason why a lot of people think it's EU5. Or from what I've gathered, people think this is EU5, is going to be the fact that we have these sort of passages that only make sense with sailing, and simultaneously we also have a world map which only makes sense, post-discovery of the New World if you're going to make a Europe-focused game. Or any sort of game that is focused on, the only time these continents are seeing each other is post-1400, right? Or post-1200 or whatever it is. And so, in that sense, it really looks like it could be that. I'm the talk of settled and also the implication that trade would be dynamic, super interesting, but the use of the word settled twice for me is just like, raises a lot of questions and is super interesting to try and think through what might be going on. And I think that this is, just focused on the settled. Also, these are land locations that cannot be settled by anyone. This, to me, also implies a secondary thing, which is very interesting, which is that people have different people will have different settling rules, right? Because why would you need to put by anyone if it's just categorically can't be settled? And this implies that perhaps there's different settling rules, but this is all speculation, and we'll see what is to come. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed. If you want me to cover these Tinto Talks more, please let me know, because for the most part we cover Victoria 3 here, obviously. But if people are really hyped about this and they want to see more about it, please let me know. And without further ado, we're ending. Sorry, that's like not the proper outro. Like, comment, subscribe due to YouTube algorithm thing, and have a good day.